I woke to the sound of my own phone vibrating against the nightstand, a thin, frantic buzz that did not stop. When I blinked my eyes open, the screen was already glowing with the first thing Northlake Communications had given me since the day before: 49 missed calls. My name flashed again and again in message previews. Marissa Calder. Urgent. Call us back immediately. Another one repeated the same line 3 times, as if shouting through text. Why does Marissa Calder own our core encryption patent? I sat up slowly. My house in Ballard was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like a held breath. I unlocked the phone. More calls kept rolling in blocked numbers, familiar extensions, even a few direct messages from board members who had never spoken to me outside a meeting. A voicemail auto-played before I could stop it. Marissa, this is Director Hall. We need clarification. Please respond. This is critical. Then another. The board is meeting in 10 minutes. Emily says this must be a mistake. But your name is on everything. I poured coffee while the phone continued buzzing on the counter. The smell grounded me. The bitterness steadied my chest. Another voicemail. A male voice, tight with panic. Marissa, this is Vice President Lowell. Call me the moment you hear this. Emily is saying legal approved something years ago, but the patent record it is updated with your name. All of it. We need to talk before the government responds. I heard the name Emily and let out a breath through my nose. Emily Talcott, the niece of our chief executive officer. The woman who looked me in the eye yesterday and told me, you do not fit our new direction anymore. Yet there she was, somewhere in a corporate conference room, pale, trembling, insisting this must all be my fault. The phone buzzed again. I silenced it and finally let myself sit at the small kitchen table. I wrapped both hands around the warm mug and let one clear thought settle, slow and steady. Everything unraveling at Northlake Communications had begun exactly 1 day ago, at the moment she fired me. And to understand why 49 missed calls were blinking on my phone, I had to go back to that moment yesterday morning, inside the room where Emily believed she had ended my career. The day before, everything collapsed. Emily Talcott stepped into my office without knocking. She always moved like someone who believed walls parted for her. Marissa, conference room 2, she said, tightening her smile. It's time. I closed the document I had been working on. Time for what for alignment, she replied, already turning her back. Inside conference room 2 sat 3 managers, all avoiding eye contact. Emily took the head seat, folded her hands, and exhaled as if preparing for a performance. Let's begin, she said, flashing that polished, artificial smile she practiced in every reflective surface on the 23rd floor. Marissa, we've reviewed our strategic direction. I nodded once, and her eyes flicked to the others, silently reminding them to stay quiet. You do not fit our new direction anymore. There it was, clean, rehearsed, pathetic. 25 years of building every layer of encryption the company prided itself on, and she threw out the sentence like she was clearing old files from her inbox. Manager Patel shifted in his chair. Emily, maybe we should know, she snapped softly. The decision is final. I felt heat rise in my chest, not from anger, but from the sharp sting of humiliation. Still, I kept my voice steady. I see. Emily leaned forward, lowering her tone to something she must have believed sounded authoritative. This is not personal. Northlake needs a fresher image, more agility, more visibility. You have contributed, of course, but it is time to evolve. Evolve, I repeated, letting the word rest in the air. Her smile sharpened. Exactly. I opened my laptop, clicked through a few final files, and closed it gently. Well, I said, rising from my chair. Thank you for the clarity. Emily blinked. That's it. Seems like it. You You do not have anything to say. No, I answered, meeting her eyes. Nothing that would change what you already rehearsed. She stiffened, clearly thrown off script. I unplugged the charger, slid the laptop under my arm, and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard her whisper to one of the managers. Why is she so calm? I kept walking. Calm was all I had left that morning, calm, and the faint memory of something Emily had clearly forgotten. After I walked out of Northlake, I headed to the small cafe near Shills Hole Marina, where I always went when I needed to untangle my thoughts. The place was quiet that morning, almost too quiet, but I barely noticed anything past the noise still ringing in my chest. I opened my laptop and pulled up the internal email I had received the day before. Subject line: Urgent, need your signature on the IP transfer, no delays. I read it once, then again. The timestamp hit me harder the second time. It was sent barely an hour before Emily called me into that room. I whispered the words aloud. IP transfer, no delays. It tasted wrong in my mouth. My colleague, Jenna Ortiz, had messaged me minutes after the email came in. Did you see this? Emily is pushing hard for your signature? At the time, I had brushed it off. Now it pinned itself to the center of everything. My phone buzzed on the table. Jenna again. Are you okay? She asked when I answered. I am fine, I said. But Jenna, do you remember that email? The one about the IP transfer. She let out a breath. Everyone was confused. Emily told legal it was just housekeeping. She said you were delaying her project. My project, I corrected softly. Jenna paused. Marissa, the demo next week. The one with the Department of Homeland Security and the Federal Communications Commission. They are calling it her signature achievement. I leaned back. She has never touched a line of that algorithm. She does not need to. Not with her uncle on top. Jenna's voice hardened. She wants the demo to crown her, not you. The pieces slid into place, ugly, deliberate, sharp. The urgent email, the demand for my signature, the sudden firing. Jenna lowered her voice. Marissa, she needed your name off something. I do not know what, but she was frantic. I know, I said. The calm that had unnerved Emily yesterday returned, cool and steady in my chest, and she fired me before I could ask why. I closed the laptop. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and Emily Talcott was not nearly as clever as she believed. The longer I stared at that strange email, the more an old memory pressed its way to the surface, one I had not touched in years. It was from the early days of Northlake, when we were still squeezed into that drafty Fremont warehouse with folding chairs and hand-me-down servers. Back then, we were a handful of exhausted engineers and one man who never raised his voice but somehow kept everyone steady, Gerald Knox, our intellectual property advisor. I remembered the day he stopped me in the hallway, holding a stack of papers. Marissa, he said, this algorithm of yours, it is not something you hand over casually. I laughed then. Gerald, we barely have working heat. Why would anyone steal anything from us? He did not laugh. Because this is the only stable encryption solution you have produced in months, and because the bigger we get, the more people will try to claim they built it. He led me into the tiny conference corner and laid out the draft provisional patent. My name was the only name under inventor and owner. This protects you, he said. And there is one more thing I want added. He pointed to a line he had typed himself. If the inventor is terminated without legitimate cause, full ownership reverts to the inventor within 48 hours. I remembered raising an eyebrow. That seems dramatic. It is insurance, he said quietly. For the future. Years passed. Northlake grew. Legal departments shifted. Paperwork rotated. And every time they asked me to sign a final transfer, they postponed it again. After the next quarter. After the next contract. After restructuring. Eventually, they stopped asking altogether. That afternoon, I returned home, walked to my safe, and spun the dial with hands that suddenly did not feel as steady as they looked. Inside, beneath old tax folders and a forgotten passport, was the sealed 2003 envelope Gerald had handed me. I slid it out. The seal was still unbroken. My name, my signature still marked the bottom. And the clause sat there, untouched, exactly the way we wrote it. I called Gerald the moment I stepped through my front door. He answered on the second ring, his voice exactly as steady as I remembered. "Marissa," he said. "You found it." "I did," I replied. "I need to see you." "1 hour." My office. When I arrived downtown, he was already waiting in a small meeting room, papers spread out like he had been preparing for this moment for years. I placed the sealed 2003 envelope on the table. He broke the seal with careful hands and read every page in silence. When he finally looked up, his expression had none of the hesitation I expected. "It is valid," he said. "All of it. The clause stands exactly as written, and the termination. It meets the condition perfectly," he answered. "They offered no cause, no documentation, nothing. Your ownership reverts in full the moment you file." My breath left me in one long exhale. "Then let's file." Gerald opened his laptop and turned it toward me. "This part should be yours." I typed slowly, checking every line. When the system prompted for a reason, I wrote termination without legitimate cause. My name filled the digital form. My signature followed. When I clicked the final submit button, a plain confirmation message appeared. Gerald nodded. "It is done." Across town at Northlake, a young intern named Austin Hale was updating the company's patent index when the new entry appeared. He blinked at the screen, rubbed his eyes, and checked again. Owner Marissa Calder. He ran down the hall, bursting into Emily's office without knocking. "Director Talcott." "The patent system. Something changed your encryption algorithm." Emily waved her hand. "Austin, systems glitch all the time. Clear your cache?" He swallowed. "I did. Twice." "Then do it a third time," she said sharply. "We are preparing for a federal presentation. I do not have time for technical superstition." Austin stood frozen, laptop trembling slightly in his hands. Emily brushed past him toward the elevator, already dismissing the update like it meant nothing. But the truth had already entered the building, quiet and irreversible. The next morning, while Gerald and I reviewed the confirmation email one more time, Northlake Communications was preparing for what Emily had called her career-defining demonstration. In a conference hall downtown, she stood on stage in a fitted suit, voice bright with confidence. "Today," she announced, "Northlake unveils the encryption breakthrough that will redefine federal communication security." Officials from the Department of Homeland Security and the Federal Communications Commission filled the front rows. Investors lined the side aisles. Cameras were rolling. Emily lifted her chin as if the future belonged to her. Halfway through her speech, the first phone chimed. A federal representative glanced at his screen, then his eyebrows pulled tight. He leaned toward another official and whispered something that made both men stand. Emily's smile faltered. "Is everything all right?" Neither answered. They simply walked out. Seconds later, more devices vibrated across the room. A quiet wave of confusion spread as people checked their alerts. One investor rose from his seat. "Is this accurate?" he demanded, holding up his phone. "Why does it say the patent owner is Marissa Calder?" Emily's voice cracked. "That must be an error. Our legal team." Another investor interrupted. "I already called my attorney. He says the update is real." The room shifted. A director from the Department of Homeland Security closed his folder without a word and headed for the exit. Executives followed. The demo's energy drained like air from a punctured balloon. Emily stepped off the stage in a daze. "Someone fix this," she whispered to her assistant. "Call legal. Call my uncle. Call anyone." But no one could fix it. Not anymore. By evening, Northlake's stock plummeted. Senior leadership blindsided investors with vague statements that convinced no one. And by the time I woke the following morning, My phone displayed all the evidence of their panic. 49 missed calls, dozens of messages, 3 voicemails marked urgent, every single one from the company that had told me I no longer fit their direction. By late afternoon, someone finally stopped calling and decided to show up in person. A man in a pressed suit stood on my porch, holding a leather briefcase like a shield. "Ms. Calder," he said, offering a tight smile. "I am Daniel Rowe, outside counsel for Northlake Communications. May I speak with you?" I stepped aside only enough to keep the door between us. "Say what you need to say." He cleared his throat. "Northlake hopes to resolve this matter peacefully. The patent update has caused complications. If you would be willing to retract your filing, the company can discuss compensation." "Compensation for what I already own?" I asked. He blinked. "The situation affects many people. If the federal agencies view this as instability, the consequences could be severe. It is in everyone's interest that you cooperate. And if I do not," his voice softened into something rehearsed, "Northlake may be forced to take more aggressive measures." I held his stare until he looked away. "Thank you for the warning," I said calmly. "You can leave now." He hesitated, then nodded and retreated down the steps. Moments after he left, my phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "If you keep pushing this, you will never work in this field again." I typed slowly. "I built this field." Her typing bubbles flickered, then vanished. I sat at my table, opened my laptop, and began drafting an email addressed to the board of directors. The subject line contained one-word terms. I listed them plainly. Immediate payment, 10% royalties on every future contract using the algorithm, a permanent voting board seat, full authorship recognition in all legal and partner materials, a funded program for senior women engineers, and finally, Emily Talcott's immediate resignation, accompanied by a signed ethics acknowledgement. I reread the message once, then pressed send. Somewhere in a glass conference room across the city, that email landed like a dropped match in a room full of dry paper. Gerald's law office was quiet when I arrived the next morning, but the tension waiting inside it was anything but. 3 members of Northlake's board sat at the conference table: Chairman Wilcox, Director Hall, and Director Stein. None of them carried the arrogance they usually wore like armor. They looked like people who had not slept. Wilcox spoke first. "Ms. Calder, thank you for meeting with us." I sat across from them. "You received my terms." Hall rubbed his forehead. "We did. They are substantial. They are accurate," I replied. Gerald slid the printed email toward them again, though they clearly knew every line by heart. Stein read the conditions aloud, her voice steady but strained. "Immediate payment," she said. 10% royalties on all future contracts, a full voting board seat, official authorship recognition, a funded program for senior women engineers." She hesitated at the last line. "And Director Talcott's resignation, with a signed ethics acknowledgement." Wilcox exhaled slowly. "You understand the position this puts us in?" "I understand the position your company put me in," I answered. The 3 exchanged looks, the kind that carry entire arguments in silence. Then they leaned together, whispering sharply but quietly. Words like "no alternative," "federal scrutiny," and "legal exposure" slipped out between breaths. Finally, Hall straightened. "The patent is yours. The law is on your side. If we attempt to contest this, Northlake risks collapse." Gerald folded his hands. "Then the decision seems simple." Wilcox nodded once, the gesture heavy. "We accept your terms," Stein added. "Effective immediately." Hall cleared his throat. "Director Talcott has been informed. She will sign the ethics acknowledgement this afternoon. Her resignation will be public by end of day." For the first time since they walked in, I felt the room shift, not with fear, not with anger, but with a quiet recognition. Wilcox met my eyes. "Ms. Calder, It is time you take your rightful place here. I closed the folder in front of me. The foundation they had once tried to bury was no longer beneath them. It was seated at their table now. When I walked back into Northlake for the first time since Emily pushed me out, no one clapped. No one rushed toward me. Instead, every person on the engineering floor simply stood. Chairs slid back softly. Screens dimmed. A quiet line of respect formed without a single spoken cue. I nodded once. Thank you. Let's get to work. We moved into the large project room, the same one where I had spent countless nights fighting outages and impossible deadlines. This time, the faces looking at me were waiting for direction, not orders from above, but something steadier. I opened the meeting. We are changing how this company operates. Not for publicity, not for a board report, for us. A younger engineer raised his hand hesitantly. What changes are we starting with authorship? I said, every document, every design, every algorithm will list the people who built it. No erasing names, no replacing credit for convenience. Murmurs spread, soft but relieved. I continued, second, legal compliance. Nothing moves to external partners without a full review. No rushed signatures, no buried clauses, no exceptions. Director Shaw, newly placed in Emily's absence, nodded stiffly. Understood. Third, I said, ethical oversight. When decisions affect careers, someone besides management will have eyes on the process. People are not expendable. In the back row, a woman with silver hair, someone I remembered from the early warehouse days, lifted her voice quietly. We were told people our age should stay invisible. I turned toward her. Not anymore. Her eyes glistened, and she lowered her head in gratitude. And finally, I said, a funded program for senior women engineers, training, advancement, and guaranteed seats at technical review tables. Age will no longer be treated like an expiration date. The room shifted again, this time with something warmer relief, maybe, or recognition. These were not dramatic declarations. They were corrections long overdue, and as I watched the team absorb them, I felt the first steady breath of a company learning how to stand differently, one decision at a time. 2 weeks after the board signed my terms, I sat across from Northlake's finance team, reviewing the settlement transfer line by line. When they finished, one of them asked quietly, "Will you be allocating the full amount to personal accounts?" "No," I said. "Only a portion. The rest goes into a new fund." Director Shaw looked up. "A Fund A, Long-Term Intellectual Property Protection Fund," I clarified, "for engineers who are overlooked or pushed out, especially women over 40 who spent their lives building things no one bothered to credit." The room went silent, not out of disagreement, out of realization. For the first time, they understood what this fight had always been about. Later that afternoon, the board assembled to vote on a new internal policy. Chairman Wilcox addressed the room. "We are here to adopt the Calder Protocol, effective immediately." He read each line aloud, the words steady and irreversible. "No work can be reassigned, rebranded, or transferred without transparent legal review. Inventor ownership must be checked, verified, and documented. Violations trigger automatic investigation." He glanced at me. "This will prevent what happened to you, what happened under Director Talcott, from ever happening again." Emily's name hung in the air. Her resignation had been announced, but her final consequence arrived quietly the day before the Industry Ethics Board formally barred her from holding any future leadership role in technology. A permanent mark, one she had earned with every lie she told. When I left the building, my phone buzzed. A message from Gerald waited on the screen. "You did not just win, you changed the rules." I paused on the steps outside Northlake, letting the words settle. Wind moved through the trees along the street, carrying a strange mix of endings and beginnings. I smiled, not because the company had fallen to its knees, not because Emily had finally faced the consequences, but because something new stood in the place of everything broken. A foundation built to protect the people who created, who built, who held the company up long before anyone cared about visibility or direction. A foundation strong enough to last,